Welcome to your number one source for technological innovations, ideas, and strategies for your business. Multiply your business's equations and put the odds in your favor. Now, live from Club IT HQ with your hosts, Ben and Sam. This is Tech Factor.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Ben.
And I'm Sam.
And this is
The Tech Factor.
The Tech Factor. Right, we're up to episode 5 of The Tech Factor. Tech Factor is a podcast about driving business productivity and innovation using technology. So today's episode is all about managed IT and, what is managed IT and why do you actually need it? So we're going to begin by talking a little bit about background, about how IT has evolved, because this concept of managed IT can be a foreign concept to some people. For those businesses that have probably a little bit larger scale, they've probably heard of managed IT before. So let's dig into a little bit of the background. So I guess, if we're talking to the early 2000s, IT was a fairly simple equation. The typical IT environment, servers weren't necessarily as common depending on the industry that you're in. A lot of the technology was still serial based. So, for example, if you were a big retail business or if you were a club and you had a point of sale system, most of the time it was serial based. So it had a serial connection. So some of them were even daisy chained. No one knew what a smartphone was. So there was no such thing as a smartphone. Obviously, PDAs were just starting to sort of come into play, which I personally had one. I had a little HP PDA and it was great. It was fairly simple, right? So IT was a fairly simple equation. But I guess what's evolved, certainly in the last 10 years and even probably a little bit more than that now, is that the IT infrastructure has slowly become more and more connected. So these days, your point of sale is part of your network. If you're, again, in the clubs industry or casinos, again, your gaming is part of your network. Your CCTV, which used to be all on coaxial cable, is now part of your network. It's all IP-based. Your phones are now connected parts to your IT network now. So back in the day, you maybe had one accounting PC that ran a copy of Mail or QuickBooks or something like that. But now again, that's all integrated, and a lot of people now have cloud-based accounting systems. We have a lot more devices than what we used to have. So in most businesses, again, back in the day, there might have been 1 or 2 computers in the office area, or maybe even 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever, but there was very little in the way of networking. Now we have literally hundreds of devices, and we also have hundreds of wireless devices as well. They're constantly going in and out of our network. So there's a big change in the way that security has changed in that regard. There's a massive change in security. We're storing a lot more data. There's heaps of data that we're storing digitally that we used to maybe file away, or maybe it used to be faxed or whatever. So the amount of data we're dealing with these days has changed massively. So, it's no longer good enough to just, do your once a month backup on your single little computer and away you go. It's we're backing up daily, several times a day. Backup monitoring is now absolutely critical. If you're any type of serious business, you need to have people there constantly monitoring your backup systems, to making sure that they're working and actually testing and validating the backups as well. Absolutely critical stuff. Even that now almost isn't enough. You need to start to use EDR technology as well, which we might get into a little bit later. But EDR is basically the new level of technology which allows us to automatically and quickly recover from disasters as well. So it's the type of thing that if you're a serious organization, you really need to look into. But we'll talk about that a bit later. Highly malicious malware and ransomware. The ransomware and also zero-day malware, zero-day malware is malware that hasn't been seen before in the real world. It's increased massively, thousands of % increase over the last 10 years. And we're talking highly malicious systems that can destroy networks within hours, completely wipe out an organization. We have seen many examples of businesses that get completely wiped out by one hit of a particular type of ransomware, and it's not uncommon for those businesses to go out of business as a result of that. We've also, one of the big changes in the recent trends in recent years has been, the cloud adoption. So we've got a lot more cloud-based solutions, whether it be your cloud-based accounting or your obviously you got your office programs that are called cloud-based now. If you're using G Suite or Microsoft 365, there's all these different programs which are great because it means again you can access your applications from your tablets or from your smartphones or from other devices and be in and out of your network. But it also creates more vectors for attack. So it creates more ways that your systems can be compromised. So just by the nature of the fact there are more systems that are out there exposed to the web. So, and the other thing is, well, everything is all integrated. So, again, this goes back to the point that if you got let's say you have one cloud application, right, and it's got integration with Office 365, it's got integration with your accounting software and whatever, and maybe that particular application doesn't have two-factor authentication. Well, it's your weakest link. And again, with all this integration, if that application gets exposed, then the rest of all your systems can get exposed as well, even though they may not necessarily have direct access to those systems. So I guess the bottom line is IT has changed a lot. There's a lot more data, there's a lot more systems, and it needs regular attention. So that's where IT has sort of evolved from it. It's not as simple as it used to be. And so I guess that leads into Sam really talking about, what is the difference between, I guess, where you have what we call break fix. So if something goes wrong, you ring up someone, go, something's wrong, please fix it, versus a more managed approach where someone is regularly monitoring and managing your IT systems.
Yeah, and I suppose that's where we're talking about today is, the difference between managed IT and the break fix approach. So with break fix, IT services are provided as requested. Pretty much if something goes wrong, you ring up either your regular IT person or another IT company and you tell them what's wrong and they will come out and fix the problem. Whereas with managed services, the provider offers a holistic IT support in terms of conditions at a detailed level agreement. So, you might have proactive monitoring and maintenance done remotely or face-to-face regular on-site visits from IT staff that will look after your business and pretty much just take care of everything rather than waiting for something to break. Go on.
Well, one of the things I was just going to say just about that as well, just with the break fix, I mean, you mentioned that people ring up when something's wrong. The other thing about it is sometimes the customer doesn't necessarily know if something's wrong, right? So that's the burden. I think we're going to talk about this as well, is that the burden really is on them to know whether there is something actually wrong. And if I don't understand technology or if I'm not right up on the systems, I might not necessarily notice something is wrong. There may be something seriously wrong that I don't notice until a month later. So
yeah, I can think of just one example in particular, Ben, where it goes, a business won't know if a hard drive is failing or if it's on its way out inside of a computer, and that computer could be mission critical. But your IT team may already know that, so you might be able to get the computer replaced and the hard drive fixed before anything even happens. Where with a break fix model, the computer will just die one day. You might even lose data and business. So that's probably my favorite example between the two.
And it's probably a good segue into, I guess, really let's talk about some of the downsides to the whole break fix approach, where you ring up someone and once something physically breaks and request them to fix it. So let's talk about some of the flaws about that.
Yeah, so there's a few of the fundamental flaws in the break fix model is pretty much your misaligned incentives and goals. So your IT service provider only gets paid when there's problems. That creates a dynamic where the service provider wins and the clients lose, because the service provider is hoping that something will break, and you may even find you might get sloppy work knowing that the device or the service will break again, so then the IT team have to come out again.
Yeah, it's a really important point. Like, I think this is, of all the sort of the key rationale, I feel like this is a really important one, because we're talking about, because with a managed approach, right, it's always a fixed amount that the client pays. So, the thing of it is that in this type of scenario, I mean, there's a massive benefit for both the provider and for the client in a fixed price scenario to make sure that things are properly and permanently fixed. They don't want to be like, if I'm a service provider, or as what we call ourselves MSPs, we want to make sure things are working nice and consistent. We don't have to be going backwards and forwards constantly under a managed arrangement because it costs us more money. We want to make sure that we get things fixed with permanent, reliable solutions. Whereas if you just get paid when things are broken, and you just go in there and just get it as fixed as needed, you're right. There's no motivation, or there's no they're not going to put as much time and effort into trying to fix and address an issue when again, like they'll benefit potentially in the future again if it does break again. So
yeah. Well, with that break fix model, the IT technician, if they go out and do an excellent job and the problem's fixed completely, well, they may also not have any more work there. So, that's where those incentives and goals are misaligned, where the IT person wants work. So, you never know what exactly.
Yeah, and we're not implying that an IT person is particularly dodgy or whatever, but we're just saying that there's no motivation to do additional work on it. For example, like you might go, okay, well, I fixed the problem, but then I might want to spend an extra hour optimizing something or trying to create maybe installing another piece of software to create a more permanent solution. And now in a break fix situation, you're not going to do that because you go, well, I've already fixed the problem. I've met the minimum requirements in that regard, and that's that. But if you've got a managed approach, you're going to spend an extra time because then you're not going to have to come back in 6 months' time to go through and fix the same issue. So that's really what it comes down to, and that's a benefit, massive benefit to both the client and the provider.
Yeah, and then we get into some of our other flaws with the break fix model is your unpredictable costs. Because break fix is reactive and case by case, it's, the client can't really budget. A business can't budget of what's going to break and when and how much it's going to cost. Whereas on a
managed approach.
Yeah, on a managed approach, those costs are fixed, and you can definitely work with your managed provider on creating those budgets, and most managed providers will sit down with a business and are more than happy to go through things like how much an IT budget should be and what to expect over the next 12 months.
Yeah, and that's pretty standard, particularly with what we do in our own business. We always talk to our clients and we engage with them and go, look, this is the types of things we need to look at in terms of upgrades for the next 12 months. And we plan them out well in advance. And, it is it's a really important factor in being proactive and making sure that we keep things operational. Because the thing is, again, if you wait for something to fail, there's a whole. I mean, the situation is massively stressful for one, just for both the client and for us. But then you end up with potential data loss, and you create all kinds of problems where a lot of the times if we wait for something to fail, particularly if it's a server, it can take a couple of weeks to prep and get ready. So you're rushing to try and get some kind of system operational as a temporary fix, and it's just an absolute mess. Like it's a nightmare. So if you can have some predictability and all, and say, right, we're going to budget this and this year, and with a managed approach, they'll sit down with you and they'll help you manage your budget in terms of your IT stuff, and they'll go through it all. You just have a much smoother approach. You know exactly what you're going to get, and it makes life a hell of a lot easier.
And we definitely know from our experiences that if it's not planned, it can be very, very expensive. IT can be very expensive if you don't plan it correctly.
It's always, the thing is as well, just the sheer fact when you do, you're doing after hours work a lot of times when something serious breaks that's unplanned. So it's a very costly experience. So again, the unpredictable cost is another really important point.
Yeah. And then here's one that you touched on earlier, Ben, and so the burden is placed on the client or the business owner. The break fix models requires clients to be the decision makers, and it's often a position they don't want to be in and may not even be qualified to be making those decisions.
Seen plenty of examples of this over the years.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we've had it. We've seen it a lot. Whereas the business may not be very tech savvy, and the business manager or the person making these decisions The decision maker might not know anything about a server or RAM or, what kind of software.
Or they might have a little
needs,
bit of knowledge,
but very minimal.
Yeah.
And
but they might have a little bit of knowledge, which is dangerous. That's the point I was going to make.
Yeah. Like, some knowledge about, like, what the computer at home uses or something may be very, very different to what your business requires. And I think having someone who understands the technology and has worked with it for many, many years is always good.
Look, I've seen so many examples of this over the years. I wouldn't even know where to start. But the worst one that really stands out to me and that'll forever be imprinted in my mind is when we went on site and we did an audit of a site which they had, inverted commas, an IT guy. Again, it was a break fix situation where they would come on site and go ahead and fix something when there's an issue. The first thing we ask when we go on site, do you have backups? Oh, yeah, we got backups. Oh, do they run? Yeah, we got backups. Yeah, they work all the time. It's plugged in over here. I went through and I checked it out, and the backups hadn't successfully run for 2 years. So because
it's plugged in doesn't mean it's working.
And just because it says it's run successfully doesn't even mean it's run successfully either. So, oh my God. So, they were in a situation where they actually badly needed to replace their server. So, I mean, the timing that we came in was impeccable, but it was scary because I looked at that and going, well, geez, these guys, they're literally, I don't know how to say it without making this episode explicit, but it was not a good situation. And, it's just another example. Yeah. But they didn't know. They just assume, the backup ran. Oh, you got this thing plugged in. It must be working. But they don't check that stuff. They don't have the qualifications for it.
And sometimes they don't even have the time to check that stuff, even if they do have a bit of knowledge on it. You're running a business. Role. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not their role. They shouldn't be something they have to worry about regardless. So it is a real problem. Like, it is a massive problem. And that's where a lot of businesses come unstuck, where they have the whole break fix approach with some breaks and you ring some up to fix it. Like, that is the biggest issue that you will see with that particular type of model. So Sam, what about the next one? What else you got for us?
Yeah, there's a few more here, but we can probably smash them all together. In reality, we've already touched on it, is downtime. So, with a break fix approach, you will have, let's say, a server breaks and you lose everything that you've got currently, and none of your computers work, and all your files are inaccessible, or your internet goes down and something blows up or whatever. You have that downtime where trying to get a replacement. You've already said, Ben, that in urgent times it can take weeks to have complex servers organized and up and running, and it can be all sorts of data recovery or making huge changes to the business.
The cost is really interesting because a lot of people don't really understand or ever calculate the cost, because the cost often can sometimes be a hidden cost. It won't directly show up in your P&L. So you won't see it as, here's the cost of screwing up your IT. But what it actually is. And so, like, I'll give you an example. So let's say you have a server that runs your point of sale system. So maybe you're a big restaurant or whatever. So let's say the point of sale server goes down. Okay, well, there's a whole bunch of costs in relation to that. So there's the staff time. So the staff time is the most obvious one. It's very easy to calculate. Obviously, you calculate the number of staff that you've got based on their average hourly rate and based on the number of hours of downtime. So effectively, if staff have to write everything down on pen and paper and they can't use the point of sale system for a few hours, well, you go, okay, well, there's my lost productivity there. I can calculate the hourly rate of my staff. I can work out what the staff cost of that system going down is. Straight away, we're probably already into the thousands. Then we talk about our productivity costs. So again, there are costs in relation to that as well, where staff maybe can't do back of house functions or other things. So they're sitting around doing other bits and pieces, or they're mopping the floor instead. You've got your income loss. So you've got your physical income loss. So when clients can't actually, or customers can't actually physically use your services, there's going to be income that's going to be lost as a result of that. And then you actually get onto the actual IT side of it, which is the data cost. So then you've got your data and IT costs and stuff like that are related to that actual scenario. So, you can easily, if you can mitigate against these types of costs or these scenarios, you save yourself, thousands, potentially tens of thousands of dollars every time you mitigate against one of these types of instances. So people really need to understand and calculate the cost of these things going down, because I don't think it's something we don't talk about enough, and it's something really important in any business these days. If your systems go down, and if you're out for a day, you could be literally doing yourself away thousands of dollars. And the other thing that I read a story yesterday actually about an attorney that's like, oh well, why do I need managed IT? There's a whole bunch of little things I just fix it myself. And the first question this service provider asked, I said, how much do you charge an hour? And you're helping someone fix their mouse and keyboard, like, do the maths. Like it's insane. Instead of you spending time going through and working on a client's files, you're going ahead and helping someone reboot their computer. You are costing yourself a lot of money, and so it's very easy. When it's human nature, right? I guess we sometimes don't necessarily think about these costs, but they are there, and it doesn't take much to understand how much it's actually costing you by not doing this. So it's a real big thing to talk about. And again, that goes into the whole short-sightedness we were going to talk about. Again, the whole thing about short-term fixes and, I'll just jump on, make my fix myself. And look, ultimately, it is more expensive. So it's a more expensive approach. It might seem cheaper because you're just having to pay for it when you absolutely need it. But every time you need it, it ends up being ultimately substantially more expensive. And, the whole thing is remediation is always more expensive than prevention. So, it's the whole thing of like, hey, I can eat a healthy diet, or I can go ahead and spend the rest of my life, with diabetes and insulin and all the medical expenses and everything that go with that. And depending on which country you're in, that's a lot of money. So it's always, if you just do the right thing in the first place, it's always a hell of a lot cheaper than trying to remediate it later on. So,
and there's another thing I'd like to pop in there, Ben, is that with managed services, and I'm going to talk about us a little bit here, is with we've integrated ourselves with a lot of our clients' business overall. We've almost become a part of some of these businesses where we help to make decisions. They will often come to us with even non-IT business questions, and how will that affect IT, and where should we look in 5 years' time, where should we look in 12 months' time. And we sit down with our clients regularly, and we'll often just talk about business rather than okay, we need to spend this much money and install this. It's not so much about just installing new computers and fixing broken ones as it is being a part of your business. And
it is very interesting, because that is the whole thing of it's not just about integration of technology now. It's also the business and technology are integrated almost as one. Like they go hand in hand these days. Like
we can't just come in and talk about computers without talking about human resources, without talking about finance, without talking about the business's goals and their their strategic strategies and things like that. Like, it's integrated.
It's all connected. Now. Yeah, it's absolutely all connected. And it's a really important point, because, often the first thing that I personally do when I sit down with a client is I ask them about their business, and I try to understand what their business is about, where they make their money, what costs them money, because again, that really leads into the technology conversation, and it leads into how we frame what we do for them. So there may be certain types of expenses that we can identify early on and go, hey, look, we can, when we start to talk about software upgrades, we're not just talking about the technology advantages. We go, okay, well, if we do this particular upgrade, we can actually deal with that particular expense in the P&L. So we can specifically target aspects of the business to improve the bottom line, or improve staff productivity, or reduce staff turnover. I mean, staffing issues are massive issues, and technology frustrations are one of those things. If staff are can't do their job half the time because the technology doesn't work, you're going to have massive issues with staff. So there's so many aspects to a business that rely on having a strategic approach to technology, and it's just something that can't be ignored these days. So what we might do. So I guess really, I mean, that really goes on about the better alignment, and again, so that's really about basically aligning the goals of both the business. And the other thing as well, I just want to give you a quick example. So we talk about the business stuff. Like I remember one example of one client where we've literally turned one business unit around from making a loss to making a profit, and that was a conscious effort of going through and understanding how that business worked, or that business unit worked, working out where the issues were, in both the human resource inside, the training, the software integration, the whole 9 yards, and then putting together a complete solution to actually, and it took a lot of time as well. It took probably about a year, but by the time we got everything sorted out, but that turned that entire business around. So,
and, with really, that business in particular, yes, they did end up spending a significant amount of money on IT to do this, but they also saved a lot of money on unnecessary things that they were paying for before. And that in turn, with some of their change in management styles and their business goals, we helped them turn it around and start making a profit. And whilst that sounds like, we're almost like financial advisors, you don't actually quite understand how much your IT and how much you spend on it really does affect those things.
Yeah, for sure. So is there any other points, Sam, that you've got down there on your little notepad?
Yeah. So, I mean, managed providers will help with better stability. Most MSPs will provide 24/7 monitoring and proactive maintenance, which we do here at Club IT, and it helps us and helps a lot of managed service providers to quickly respond to issues. We can get notifications 24/7, whether a server goes offline, whether a computer has a virus, whether there's a computer with a failing hard drive. And that's where we can go to those businesses and we can go, hey, look, we can spend X amount of money and we can save you a whole ton just by fixing this issue before it causes a bigger problem. And that's the same with it creates infrastructure upgrades rather than simply applying band-aids. Managed service providers provide clients with a more robust and secure IT environments, managing the network performance, making sure that backups are working, making sure antivirus is working, having proper business email set up and a help desk. So, where staff and business management can just send off an email or through a client, and your managed service provider can just reply and fix the problems within usually a pretty reasonable time frame. And generally it's cheaper than having in-house IT as well. So there's always another.
Yeah, I mean, so certainly if your business is at the stage where you're trying to weigh up, and we can talk about this in another podcast, basically hiring your first IT guy versus looking at a managed service provider. A managed service provider, a good one that's basically has a proper strategic. I mean, there are certainly bad ones and good ones, but a good one will not only be cheaper, but actually will have a larger skill set than what you'll get with one individual staff member. So, because it's important to point out that even if you hire a IT person, and often look, we have sites where we may, and we do have great relationships with our IT staff and IT directors of organisations that we work with. Often they'll have understandings of a lot of the basics, but they still need the specialities. They still need to understand specialities in certain systems and certain technologies, and that's where we come in. So certainly in some scenarios, we also work with in-house IT where we have in-house IT and then we have us as a support role. But if you're in the stage of your business where you're looking at maybe hiring your first IT person, you might be able to save some money by just going with a MSP and having a more direct agreement with them. That's also an option for some providers, for some customers as well. So I guess, the big question that we were going to answer today was, why do you need it? Well, I kind of feel like we've already answered that. I mean, really the difference between having an approach where something goes wrong, you ring up, try and get it fixed, and versus a managed approach is massive. And really in the modern IT world, I mean, things have evolved. You need a more strategic approach to IT. It's more connected. There's more ways for things to go wrong. So it's just to have someone manage all that and to deal with all those issues, to deal with the risk, to have the qualification and the knowledge, and to also really help drive your business. I mean, as I said, if you use IT properly, it can be a money maker. A lot of people see, some people will see IT as a cost, but if you do IT properly, IT can actually be a competitive advantage in your business. And it's really important to point that out. If we minimize the cost of downtime, we're not only going to be saving money, and if we have a strategic approach to IT, we can also find ways to make money as well. So, it's a really, it's a technology there, and depending on your approach, there's different ways to utilize that technology, and it's the same with any piece of technology. But if you're smart about it, you can make that technology work for you, and it can not only be a cost saver but a money maker, and play a massive role in your business. Any other thoughts, Sam, before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, I think you've pretty much touched on everything there, Ben. And, it just comes down to that cost of downtime, strategic approach, your own time, what's your personal cost, risk, predictable costs. And that, like we said at the start of this podcast, Ben, IT has changed. It's integrated to nearly every single point of your business. Now, everything is interconnected, from your POS, gaming systems, to all down to your finance software, to your computers, your emails,
the other thing that's really changed, security. I mean, because the thing of it is, these days, a business is more likely to actually be attacked in the cyber world than in the real world. There's less and less of the physical robberies these days. The criminals have gone online, and that's where they can actually make their money and be far more anonymous and actually be a little bit more successful. So, and the reality of it is that if you're not a business that's taking a proactive approach or a managed approach to IT, we call it proactive because we have our model is called Club IT Proactive. But if you're not taking that approach, you are going to be exposed to that issue. And what we are also seeing now is a change in so cybersecurity insurance is a big thing. It's a growing industry, and as that evolves, they're going to enforce more and more requirements on business that if you want to get cyber insurance, you're going to have to tick all these boxes. You're going to have a managed approach to IT. You're going to have backups and all your managed firewalls and all these things in place in order for you to qualify for cybersecurity insurance. So something to be very conscious of, because whether we like it or not, this is where it is evolving. And, putting aside that, the reality of it is that it's just such a much better model for a business, and it'll deliver better outcomes. It'll save money. It'll provide predictable budgets. It's a win-win-win across the board. So if you're not doing managed IT, have a look into it. If you are based in Australia, certainly give Club IT a ring. We can certainly help you out with that. So I would highly encourage you to check that out. But that's a wrap. So I think that sums up our episode. So that was why, what is managed IT, and why do you need it? So let's wrap that up. I'm Ben.
And I'm Sam.
And we'll see you guys next time.